Hello everyone, once again from the dystopian capitalist monarchy of the United Kingdom, and today we are doing a kind of, I guess, like a follow-up video of my videos about either like conservative dating apps, like conservative women hating conservative men because they treat them terribly, and just like all this stuff about women and right-wing guys, because I'm a bit late to this. There was a poll out last week and it showed that a lot of women do not like men who listen to Joe Rogan. And I did a bit of my own research in that I asked my Instagram and Twitter followers, people who date men, what do you think about this? Is it a red flag if someone listens to Joe Rogan? And the answers were not surprising, but they were interesting. So I'm going to get round to all of this today. And we're just going to talk about, is listening to Joe Rogan a red flag? Is being a fan of Joe Rogan a red flag? I guess a spoiler is, in my opinion, yes. I don't even really want to be friends with anyone who is a big fan of Joe Rogan, especially over the last like 2.5 years, where he just gone like mask off, reactionary, conservative, endorsing like the worst, conservative politicians, talking about cancel culture, being anti-vax, being transphobic, getting on loads of people who are like very, very far right, like Matt Walsh, Ben Shapiro constantly, Jordan Peterson constantly. Like, if you are a fan of Joe Rogan and respect his opinion, you're just a knucklehead conservative, right? Because you can't be a fan of Joe Rogan anymore and divorce like the MMA stuff from the political stuff, because he literally is just a very conservative dude at this point. So all of that coming up for you today in the video, but before we go any further, like the video, and also, if you date men, would it be a red flag? Would it be a deal breaker if a man you were seeing was a big fan of Joe Rogan? Not someone who listens to the odd podcast, not someone who, kind of knows who he is. I mean someone who actually like listens to every podcast and like maybe even bases their personality off him. I'd be very interested. But also check out my social media at the Kavernacle on Twitter, on Instagram, also on Threads, Blue Sky, basically on everything, and consider becoming a patron. I'm trying to build up as many $1 to $3 patrons as possible. Benefits include access to the Discord server, and give me a message when you've signed up and I'll give you your code. Also access to my Nintendo Switch friend code and access to old exclusive content, and also check out my subreddit and check out my second channel. The links to everything down in the description. So Joe Rogan's podcast has been one of the most popular podcasts around for, I don't know, a decade at this point. And I guess everyone in the comments would like to know, did I have a Joe Rogan phase? Now, the last podcast of Joe Rogan I listened to, because I wanted to, was his interview with Oliver Stone in September 2020, and an interview with Edward Norton, I think. And actually, he got Oliver Stone a book sale because I bought the audiobook of Oliver Stone's autobiography narrated by Stone himself, and I really enjoyed it. So I'm glad I listened to Joe Rogan for that, and I recommended it to my girlfriend, and I recommended it to one of my family members, and we all thought the autobiography was absolutely amazing. Oliver Stone is a fantastic writer, and his life is just super interesting. So that was good. The Edward Norton conversation was okay, but before that, I guess sometimes I'd listen to Joe Rogan, like if he had a guest on that I kind of liked, like an actor, or, Bernie Sanders, or even in the past, Tulsi Gabbard, if we're talking about like 2019, when she wasn't just a mask-off, transphobic, far-right, what even is she now, like talking head on Fox News? And I remember in 2016, I would listen to like some of his more political guests, and I didn't listen to like anything after really 2020, but 2021 is when he started to go downhill, and I've always been very critical of him for being a bit of an idiot, because he'd always platform like people on the far right, let them spew absolute garbage, and he'd never challenge them. But at least in the past, he claimed to have progressive politics, and he also had progressive guests on. So I gave him like a tiny bit of a pass, but yeah, nowadays it's just garbage, isn't it? It's like anti-vaccine stuff, platform every far-right conspiracy theorist, conservative, and there's just like nothing redeeming about him, like retweeting people talking about what is a woman, telling people to go watch it, platforming Matt Walsh to talk about this stuff, basically platforming fascists to say whatever they want on one of the biggest podcasts. I would say, if you are a fan of Joe Rogan, you are probably a very conservative person at this point, or someone who is like one of those weird contrarian conspiracy theorists like Jimmy Dore types or Glenn Greenwald or something, right? So I can totally understand why women would be hesitant to date people like this. Because I think to a lot of women, it tells them that you are conservative. And as I talked about in that video about conservative women hating conservative men, basically the default of a conservative man is that he doesn't view you as an equal, and he's more likely to treat you like shit than someone else, right? I'm not saying that men can't treat women badly no matter what their politics, but if you believe in a very pro-patriarchy, conservative, pro-status quo worldview, then yes, you're probably not going to treat women very well. Not to mention a lot of these people that Joe Rogan has platformed have also fought against, like, no-fault divorce and stuff. We spoke about this a lot lately. So yes, not surprising that when a woman hears someone is a Joe Rogan fan, they automatically think, well, this person is probably a reactionary conservative, or at best some sort of knucklehead conservative libertarian. Now, what are we talking about here? Like, why am I even speaking about this? So, like I said, there was a poll recently, and the Joe Rogan subreddit have been speaking about this. I just wanted to read the poll and some of the reactions. So, Rogan is considered a red flag dating. So, red flags in a partner change research. So, for women, we have 78% saying being a MAGA Republican, and that's probably like a massive crossover with Joe Rogan fans. They have no hobbies at 66%. They say all lives matter at 60%. They say there are only two genders, 58%. They are so unbothered, they never ask for details, 58%. They identify as a communist. Now, I am very, very insulted by this. Now, anyone who dates men in the comments, would you automatically not want to continue to date if you're on a date with me and I told you I was a communist, right? Is it really such a red flag, even if I don't whip out my red communist flag? I find that one very curious. It's on the same level as listen to Joe Rogan. So listen to Joe Rogan is 55%, and identifying as a conservative, 54%, right? So to a lot of people in America, I think, sadly, they think it's more of a red flag to be a communist than it is to be a conservative, which I find absolutely insane, but probably not surprising when everyone in the Western world is brainwashed to think that communists and fascists are like as bad as each other. I'd be curious for the woman who said it's a red flag that a man's a conservative or a communist to let me know, who would you rather go on a date with? A communist or a conservative man in America? And I'll let anyone in the comments be the judge, right? If you date men, I don't care what your politics are, would you rather go on a date with a male communist or a male conservative? I think it's a really easy answer, because in theory, the communist would see you as an equal. I know that's not the reality all the time, but in theory they would. In reality, nearly every single conservative is going to view you as inferior. And it's funny that for men, being a communist woman is the biggest red flag at 64%, which I think is funny. But on the Joe Rogan subreddit, you get some interesting comments. One person saying, the amount of denial in these comments is genuinely surprising to me. If you're shocked by this, then you do not interact with young women very often. The study sample consists of people 18 to 34 years old, the same age demographic of women who overwhelmingly vote for leftist candidates and support progressive causes. The survey's results track very well with young women preferring like-minded men. The idea that girls in their 20s and 30s want MAGA men is a fantasy. But then you get other comments like this. Pretty obvious that the people who made the poll have an agenda. Otherwise, mentions of Rogan would not even be in the poll. They hate him. And they know the CNN snipe attacks failed. So this is just another avenue of attack. See, girls won't date you if you listen to Rogan. Better stop. I'd like to find whoever made the poll so I can rest my balls on their forehead. Making the case there that male Joe Rogan fans are actually very nice. Very nice, and you should date them. Some people cannot separate politics from anything. If some chick has a problem that I like to listen to a podcast, when I like the guest, then I don't want to associate with them anyway. So, again, I don't think women or anyone should dissociate politics from a potential partner, because politics are just a reflection of your values, right? If you support the LGBT community, that's politics, right? So they want to know that you're going to support maybe children, no matter what. If you are a Republican conservative, you don't support LGBT people, right? So it's very easy. I don't know how people can't understand this, but I will elaborate on this a bit later, because I asked my followers, and he's saying that I don't want to date someone who would have a problem with me listening to a podcast with a guest I liked. Like I said, I listened to the Oliver Stone one in 2020. If I said to a girl I was dating, yeah, I don't like Joe Rogan. In fact, I hate him, but I did like that interview he did with Oliver Stone like 3 years ago. I don't think they're going to get like super outraged about that. Again, proving these women's points. Women walking around quoting Taylor Swift, like what's wrong with that? And Rihanna worshipping Nicki Minaj, okay, that's a bad thing. And Cardi B, don't think that's a bad thing. Saying it's a red flag. Some people like listening to Joe Rogan. Bitch, please. Your idols are bought hoes and ghostwriters. So, again, perfectly proven why women are very, very in their right mind to say, listening to Joe Rogan is a red flag. Because you've got guys like this saying, oh, yeah, Joe Rogan platforming actual fascists is actually the same as you liking Taylor Swift, and you're a hoe. So, like, again, like just proving the point that, yeah, women or anyone who dates men should be wary of people who are Joe Rogan fans. So on faux moi, a lot of women also chiming in. So study finds majority of women find it a turn off if partner listens to Joe Rogan. Instant red flag. I would cut him loose immediately. So like I was saying, a lot of people aren't hard line. Someone listening to the odd episode with a guest they like, totally reasonable. Someone listening to every single 3-hour episode, loving Rogan himself and choosing to bring it up in a conversation, definitely a red flag. So like I said, we're going to get into this a bit more, but it is funny that Joe Rogan fans' reaction to being told that it's a red flag to some women that your Joe Rogan fan is calling them a hoe pretty much confirms it. And another problem is, because of the way Joe Rogan frames conversations as everyone is reasonable, if he gets Jordan Peterson on spouting absolute garbage, like he often does, because these people do not have critical thinking skills, otherwise they wouldn't be a fan of Rogan in the first place, they're just going to absorb this information and start believing it. And that's why in the past, before Joe Rogan went like completely right-wing, like openly, people would just have the weirdest politics if they like Joe Rogan. Like they'd support like universal healthcare, but then be like super conservative in other areas. They basically just, you know, whatever Joe Rogan thought, basically. And they'd just be so easily influenced by the guests he brought on. It's back in like that 2016 to like 2019 intellectual dark web era where they think like, oh, having reasonable, rational conversations is the best way to learn things. Not realizing every single person that Joe Rogan usually got on was a fucking idiot. But, you know, now we just have people on it who are just open, you know, far-right grifters like Matt Walsh. But yes, I did ask my own followers. So I said, for a video I want to make, anyone who dates men, would you continue a relationship if he told you he was a massive Joe Rogan fan? My replies on Twitter weren't too detailed. I do appreciate everyone who replied, but that's a massive red flag. But lucky, they usually make it known they're a fan of him right away because they can't shut up about it. Absolutely not. I can understand having friendly relationships with people who have different outlooks to you, but a life partner is completely different. Like I was saying before, completely agree. As someone who used to like Rogan, if he told me he was a massive fan, I would curve him instantly. No, absolutely not. It's a deal breaker because anyone who is a massive Joe Rogan fan will not just let it be something they listen to. They will repeat Joe Rogan talking points. They will insist you listen to so-and-so's episode. They will not stop trying to induct you into the cult. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Listening to a few episodes here and there for the guest or topic out of curiosity, sure. But every devout listener ends up spewing his shitty talking points. So my Instagram DMs, I actually got like a lot more comments from people. And I'm going to try and read out as many as possible. I do apologize if either like I don't read it out or I cut it later on for time. I do appreciate everyone taking their time to send these. So the first one from Mango Podcast, who's actually another YouTuber. They made a very good video about Disney's like apparent wokeness, going into like how Disney aren't really woke, especially the way they treat their workers. So go check out Mango's YouTube channel. But Mango saying, I know the whole he listens to Joe Rogan has become a meme, even though he's quite popular. I personally wouldn't date a man who listens to the current Joe Rogan, not only because of his far-right ideas, but also because at the end, the far-right will always end up in sexism. And I feel like a lot of men who listen to him nowadays are very angry, because let's be honest, what excuses would a man have for listening to Rogan if the podcast is mostly about dangerous conspiracy theories pandering to the far right? Men cannot say anymore that Joe Rogan talks about MMA, or things like that, because that's not the focus of the podcast anymore. It's an echo chamber where Joe Rogan only invites people who agree with him. And yeah, I agree with Mango's sentiment there. And also, even the MMA stuff gets political as well. He always talks about like transgender athletes and transgender fighters as well. So yeah, I agree with that. It is just like a right-wing echo chamber. And if you actually like, I like this podcast, like, what do you like about it? Like, seriously, is there anyone who's watching this video who's not a conservative, who's not on the far right, who listens to Joe Rogan's podcast and is a fan of the podcast? Why do you listen to that? Do you listen to it to listen to how stupid people are? Like, I don't really get it. So Santan Davis saying, I don't think I would end things just like that because I wouldn't want to judge someone too much for it at first. And if I'm already in a relationship with them, there must already be a lot of things I like and respect about this person. However, we'd obviously discuss it a lot. And if he still didn't change his views on Rogan, I'd be super put off. Saying that I don't think Joe Rogan is the very worst, but I think if he continued to be a fan despite new information, I'd really question how suited we are and why he can't just let go of this. Also, if he loves Rogan that much, he probably is on board with the other people Joe Rogan enables and has on his show, and that's a big no-no for me. I guess it would also depend how critical he was about what he was hearing on the show. So I think those are all fair points. That's a good point at the end about you judge about how critical they are, because sure, I guess someone could listen to it to, I don't know, not consume everything Rogan is saying and disagree with it, even though I think those people are very much in the minority. But something she was getting out there with a message about like having to talk about these things, I think is very important, because obviously you're watching this channel, so you like politics, but a lot of people are just like normies, right? Like they might not even know the controversy around Joe Rogan. And as someone who is from the UK, a lot of people in the UK don't know anything about American culture wars. So if I say to someone Joe Rogan's transphobic, they might genuinely be surprised. If I say Joe Rogan platforms the far right, they might be like, well, what are you talking about, right? Because they don't really understand what's going on in the climate of US politics. So they might just like listen to everything and just not have enough critical thinking skills. So I guess you'd have to challenge them to make sure that they're not watching episodes of Matt Walsh and agreeing with everything Joe Rogan and Walsh are saying about trans people. And yeah, if you like that person, that's fair enough. For me, I think it'd be too much emotional labor, even as a friendship, to get people out of that bubble of being like a Joe Rogan simp. But let's continue. This is from Anon. So depends on which Rogan era. If it was pre-Texas, then yeah, sure, I can look past that. Even then, it's a grey flag at best. But if he's still a fan with the current way of things, then hell no. I'm walking out immediately. I don't need to know anything else. This is a great litmus test of who you want to be associated with. For me as a straight man, I wouldn't be dating men anyway, but even as a friendship, like if you start banging on about Joe Rogan to me, and we've all lost friends to Joe Rogan, we've all had those friends who we used to like, and then they just can't shut up about Joe Rogan stuff. And then we're like, you're boring. Like, we hate you now. I find this so funny. Ashley saying, absolutely not. Saw Joe Rogan on a guy's Spotify, and it was an instant turn off. Haven't spoken to him since. I very much respect that. I respect like not even wanting to deal with anyone who listens to Joe Rogan. I found that really funny. Robin saying if I could make fun of him about it and he didn't mind, but if he took it super seriously, then no. Michelle saying, I don't think I would. There's maybe nuance in the intent though, like if it's out of nostalgia for the old Rogan, or if it's for the guests more than Joe, or if it's to laugh at the stupid thing the ape man says. However, those would have to be very specific scenarios, and I broadly think of any man with even a passing interest in Rogan to be a red flag, so largely no on Joe boys, but exceptions can be made. And I find that's the case with a lot of people. There are certain exceptions they will make for people who listen to Joe Rogan, but at the same time, I do respect people who just like, no, like I'm not even going to deal with this. Emily saying, no, unless we can have an educational discussion about it. And he stops, otherwise just no. Inglorious B-Star saying, I would want to know why first, and then decide based on their answer. If I think Joe Rogan is a genius, correct, or enlightened, then I would discontinue. For relationship, I respect that as well. Zayas saying, yikes, this isn't relationship-based, but if I was getting to know a guy, even just as a friend, this would be a red flag for me. Real vulnerable male friendships are already hard to come by, but hearing that from a dude, I would 100% assume they are not capable of having a real connection with a friend, if that makes sense. Veronica saying, I would consider leaving my husband if he became a Joe Rogan fan. I married a thoughtful feminist. I don't want to see him start on the gateway drug to sexism, science denialism, and toxic masculinity. Before I was married, I dated women, and I also wouldn't have kept dating one if I found out they were a Rogan fan. If Joe is still around when my children can make their own listening choices, I will do everything to show them the ways he is wrong. Honestly, part of the reason I don't want children is like all the garbage they'd be exposed to and I'd have no control over it. The same way like My parents didn't really have any control over what I consumed on YouTube, even, 2007, 2008. And it's so much worse now. Like, you saw that clip of Sneeko having, like, these kid fans all just saying the most, like, insane shit to him, which he said himself. Him realizing that, yes, words do have consequences, and children will just repeat dumb stuff and be indoctrinated in bigotry. So, yeah, like, I totally understand this, that it is something you don't want anyone you know to really fall down the rabbit hole on, especially post-Texas Joe. So another Anon account saying, I would absolutely not date a Joe Rogan stan. That dude was already transphobic before he started the podcast, which is an obvious deal breaker for me as a trans person. And just like researching this video, I found like old videos from like 10 years ago, and he's still being transphobic. Like when the culture war around this stuff wasn't as big, like he's always been transphobic. So that absolutely makes sense. Walter saying, pansexual here and hell the fuck no. I won't even befriend a person who listens to Rogan in any way. And yeah, I feel that too. Like, most of my friendships are from primary and secondary school. And I do know people who used to listen to Joe Rogan, although I don't think they do anymore. So that's one thing. But yeah, like, if I was having a new friendship and someone told me this, I would definitely not become friends with that person. Like, no matter what the context is, no matter how much I like them, I'd always keep my distance. I'd be like, you probably have terrible views about stuff that's really important to me. So Cammy saying, I know a decent amount of normal folks who like to listen to him talk about psychedelics, drugs, the drug war, and I have no problem with that. But if someone were to tell me they're a huge Rogan fan or something, that's a deal breaker, because at the very least, that says to me they're an anti-vaxxer, if not a full-blown transphobe and homophobe. Yeah, there's so much baggage that comes with being like a Joe Rogan fan. Like, people are just saying so much different stuff, but it's true. Like, anti-vaxxer, transphobe, homophobe, conservative, they got to be one of these things, right? Like, how do you listen to that podcast and be a fan of him if you're not one of these things? Because wouldn't it make you, like, get so frustrated listening to this garbage all the time? Like, how could you be a fan if you didn't at least buy into some of this stuff, I guess? So this is my last one. Rachel saying, if he listened to him occasionally, yes, because even I have out of curiosity and for research. But if he was an avid watcher, listener, and put him in the godly category and on a pedestal, like a lot of people do with these figureheads, 100% not. Because all that says to me is that this guy has the ability to be complacent when it comes to people who have been a harm to society. Plus, most of the guys that worship Joe Rogan also worship the Joker and Elon Musk, so I'll pass. And yeah, like, that's something I didn't speak about as much, is the ecosystem, because if you like Joe Rogan, he loves Elon Musk, he loves conservatives, like at the Daily Wire, he's mates with them and stuff. He likes terrible, like, medical grifters who are all anti-vaccine. So if you start dating someone who likes Joe Rogan, it doesn't even stop there, probably. Like, if you start bringing up, like, Jordan Peterson, they probably like him as well, despite him being an absolutely insane fascist, right? For a lot of people, and only 55% of women said it was a red flag, by the way, in that survey. Like, about the same level as a communist, which is really funny. But yeah, like, so there's so much baggage that comes with that. And, like, do you really want to date a man and have to educate them about all these things? Like, educate them about why he's wrong. Educate them about why Joe Rogan is a bad influence, or platforms bad people, or does damage to society. Like, if you're just on, like, a first date, or like a second date, or even, like, a fifth date, like, and you find that out, is it really worth it in this day and age? If you're, like, 18 or 19, I can understand. If you're, like, my age, 27, nearly 28, and you're going to try and deal with this, like, people don't change that quickly when you get older. And yeah, if I dated men, 100%, Joe Rogan fan, no way. Even being friends with him, no way. Because I want to limit how much toxicity is in my life. I want to build a friendship on shared values and shared interests. And yes, granted, you can often have friendships where you don't talk about politics, like friendships specifically. You can have, friendships which all revolve around video games or revolve around, like, sport. Like, I play Sunday League football. There's so many people there. I'm not saying we're, like, great friends, but all we talk about is football. Some of my very good friends from, like, primary school, like, all we talk about is football, right? I don't really know their opinions on everything. We're just friends because we've always been friends. But it's different when you're making new relationships. And if you want a romantic relationship, life partner, like I said, do you really want to deal with this? Do you really want to, like, help them unpack all this baggage and try and convince them, like, I don't know, the basic facts of reality about, like, medical science, or tell them not to be bigoted towards transgender people, or just not be a knucklehead conservative, I don't think it's worth it for most women, especially if you care about politics. And often, you don't even need to care about, like, electoral politics, you just need to care about, like, social politics. Like, we're all equal, don't be a hateful bigot. And even that seems to be rare among Joe Rogan fans. But again, let me know what you guys think down in the comments. And if you made it this far, thank you for watching.